Road graders are supposed to be the unsung heroes of construction, the machines that smooth out chaos and make roads possible. But what happens when the machine itself becomes the chaos? Some graders were so badly designed, so catastrophically oversized, so hated by operators, or so cursed by politics that they became legends for all the wrong reasons. Today we're counting down the 10 most hated road graders ever built. Buckle up, because some of these stories will absolutely blow your mind. Number 10. The Champion Model 5070. Let's start with a machine that was hated not for mechanical disaster, but for something operators cared about deeply: pure, unapologetic ugliness. In the early 1950s, Champion, one of Canada's most storied grader manufacturers, with roots going all the way back to the 1870s in Pennsylvania, introduced a machine called the Model 507 Road Maintainer. It was aimed squarely at low-budget counties and cash-strapped local government bodies that couldn't afford anything better. Champion's own industry publications from the era describe it as a hideous-looking machine, and that's being generous. The 507 was powered by a 40-horsepower engine. For context, that's barely more than a modern riding lawnmower by today's standards. Absolutely pathetic for a full-size road grader. It did feature full hydraulic controls and an enclosed cab, which were actually forward-thinking for the time. But the machine was built on a converted tractor skid unit, which meant its proportions were completely wrong. It looked like someone had strapped a grader blade to the front of a tractor and called it a day, because that's essentially what they did. Operators hated the 507 because it was underpowered for serious road work. County road crews were stuck pushing it well beyond its limits, burning through engines and completing road sections at a fraction of the pace of competitors. To Champion's credit, the machine was commercially successful. It sold in decent numbers because it was cheap, but everyone who operated one knew it was the bottom of the barrel. Champion would go on to redeem itself through the 1960s and 1970s with the highly respected D600 series and the massive 100T model, which at 22,000 pounds became the world's largest production grader in 1975. But the 507 remained the black sheep of the Champion family, a machine that even its creator seemed embarrassed to have built. Number 9. The Galion T700. When the Galion Iron Works and Manufacturing Company introduced the T700 in 1955, the heavy construction world was in the middle of a massive infrastructure boom. America was building the interstate highway system, massive dams were under construction, and open-pit mining was expanding rapidly. The need for large graders was real. Galion's answer was the T700, a genuine giant for its era, positioning itself as the first supersized grader on the market. On paper, it was an impressive engineering achievement. In practice, it ran into problems that would define its legacy. The machine was simply ahead of the infrastructure needed to support it. In 1955, maintenance shops weren't set up to handle a grader of this scale. Parts were difficult to source. Operators who had trained on standard-sized graders found the T700's handling characteristics completely foreign. The machine demanded a different operational philosophy. Slow, deliberate passes on mining haul roads, but contractors were trying to use it like a conventional grader on road construction jobs. The results were predictably awful. The T700 also suffered from the fundamental problem that plagued nearly every supergrader of the era. The market wasn't big enough to sustain it. Mining operations with the haul truck sizes that would genuinely need a T700 class machine were still using 15-ton trucks in the mid-90s. The market needed machines this big, but not yet. Galion ended up with a machine it couldn't sell in meaningful numbers, and the T700 was quietly discontinued after a short production run, leaving behind a reputation for being an impressive but ultimately impractical machine that showed up to the party about a decade too early. Number 8. The WABCO 8888. In 1967, Westinghouse Air Brake Company, better known as WABCO, unveiled the Model 8088, their largest ever motor grader. WABCO was primarily known for its off-highway haulers and was attempting to expand its product line into the grader market. The 88 featured a 14-foot blade and was powered by a 230-horsepower GM diesel engine, slightly more powerful than the Caterpillar 16 it was trying to compete against. On paper, it was a credible machine. In reality, it suffered from an identity crisis that operators found frustrating. WABCO's engineering team designed the 888 for heavy-duty mining applications, but its blade positioning options were limited compared to mainstream graders. Operators on mining sites found they couldn't get the machine to do what they needed it to do. The blade simply didn't offer the range of adjustments that experienced grader operators expected. Meanwhile, WABCO's sales force was trying to market it as a general-purpose road construction machine, which it was frankly too large and specialized to be. The 888 fell between two markets without fully serving either one. Mining contractors who wanted a purpose-built mining grader preferred other options. Road construction crews found the machine oversized and awkward. WABCO, never truly committed to the grader market in the first place, ultimately retreated from the space. The 888 slipped into obscurity, remembered today mostly by heavy equipment historians as a machine that WABCO probably wished it had never built. Number 7. The Austin Western Super 301. Austin Western had been making motor graders since the early days of the industry and had built up genuine credibility in the market. Their machines were well regarded, their operator interfaces were reasonably intuitive, and the brand had loyal customers across North America. Then in 1971, the Clark Equipment Company took over and began reshaping the Austin Western grader lineup, releasing the Super 301 as one of the first machines under the new corporate direction. And the grader community noticed, for all the wrong reasons. The Super 301 represented what happens when corporate accountants start making engineering decisions. Cost-cutting was evident throughout the machine. Components that had been robust in previous Austin Western models were replaced with cheaper alternatives. The reliability that operators had come to expect from the Austin Western name deteriorated noticeably. Operators who had previously championed Austin Western machines felt betrayed. The Super 301 and its successors under Clark's ownership never recovered the reputation Austin Western had built. The brand, which had once been one of the most trusted names in graders, faded into irrelevance over the following years. For longtime Austin Western fans, the Super 301 represented the death of something they genuinely loved, and that kind of betrayal tends to generate lasting, passionate hatred. Number 6. The Huber Warco D1500. The Huber Manufacturing Company had been making construction equipment since 1854. That's before the American Civil War. Based in Marion, Ohio, Huber was one of the true pioneers of the motor grader industry, introducing its first graders in the 1920s and developing one of the earliest hydraulic control systems for graders in 1926. When Huber acquired the W.A. Riddell Corporation, known as Warco, in 1957, the combined company became Huber Warco, and they had a genuine reputation for building tough, no-nonsense machines. Their maintainer line, first introduced in 1943, was a tractor-sized integral motor grader that became a workhorse for county road departments and military operations across North America. Then came the D1500 and the beginning of the end for everything Huber had built. The D1500 was Huber Warco's attempt to compete in the mid-size grader market against Caterpillar, Galion, and John Deere during the late 1960s and into the 1970s. Powered by a Detroit diesel 6V53 engine, it was a heavy, rigid-frame machine at a time when the industry was rapidly moving toward articulated designs. While competitors were adopting articulated frames that allowed operators to offset the front wheels for more precise grading, Huber stubbornly clung to its rigid frame philosophy. The result was a machine that felt a generation behind the moment it rolled off the assembly line. Operators complained relentlessly about the D1500. The hydraulic controls were notorious for sticking if the machine sat idle for even short periods. The power steering system had a persistent seal failure on the main input shaft that operators came to accept as an inevitable part of ownership rather than a fixable defect. The brakes were consistently described as terrible, functional, but barely, and the machine's overall appearance was, to put it charitably, agricultural. More than one operator described their Huber as looking like a tractor that had been stretched and given a blade, which, given Huber's origins in farm equipment, was perhaps more accurate than the company would have liked. What made the D1500 truly tragic, though, was what it represented in the larger Huber Warco story. In 1977, the company was acquired by ACCO Inc., which later became Figge International. The new corporate owners relocated production from Marion, Ohio to Charleston, South Carolina, severing the company from over a century of institutional knowledge and skilled labor. Quality declined further. The grader line was stripped down. By 1994, every Huber product except the small M-series maintainers had been discontinued. What was left of the company was sold to enterprise fabricators who moved operations to Galion, Ohio, where production limped along until it finally ceased after 2002. A company that had been building equipment since before Abraham Lincoln's presidency, gone. The D1500 didn't kill Huber Warco by itself, but it was the machine that marked the point where the company stopped innovating and started dying. The U.S. military bought hundreds of Huber graders over the decades, and many of them are still scattered across government surplus yards and rural properties today, sitting in fields, slowly rusting, monuments to a brand that once mattered and a machine that helped ensure it eventually wouldn't. Number 5. The Raygo Giant. This one has a fascinating origin story. The Raygo Giant began life as the Harris Blade, a concept developed by Ken Harris, a South Dakota contractor, in the late 1960s. Harris had a specific vision for a super-heavy grader that could do brutal reclamation work on surface coal mines, and he developed and tested the concept over several years before partnering with Raygo Inc., a company primarily known for its compaction equipment. Raygo Inc. began manufacturing the Giant in The machine was genuinely enormous, weighing 106,000 pounds and featuring double articulation with a pair of General Motors 318 horsepower diesel engines, one at each end, each driving a single axle. The operator's cab sat on the rear frame, suspended directly over the rear articulated joint, which sounds exciting until you realize it was extremely uncomfortable, and the panoramic view of the blade was more impressive in the brochure than in daily operation. Here is the fundamental problem that doomed the Giant. Its blade was fixed to the central frame rather than mounted on the conventional circle arrangement that every experienced grader operator knew how to use. On a standard grader, the circle mount allows the blade to rotate, angle, and tilt through a wide range of positions. The Giant's fixed blade concept meant it simply could not perform many of the tasks that contractors expected from a grader. It was fine for straight-line heavy-duty leveling on a surface mine, but completely inflexible for any other application. The concept, as one industry publication noted at the time, didn't really catch on. That's putting it politely. Contractors who bought the Giant found themselves with a 53-ton machine that could only do one thing well. Raygo went out of business in 1985 when CMI purchased the company. Rights to the Raygo Giant then passed to Caterpillar in 1987, but Caterpillar wisely chose not to produce any more of them. A handful of Giants survived and have become cult curiosities among heavy equipment enthusiasts, but during their working life, they were deeply frustrating machines to own and operate. Number 4. The O&K G350, German engineering. Those two words carry enormous weight in the heavy equipment world. So when Orenstein and Koppel, better known as O&K, launched its massive G350 mining grader in 1980, the industry paid attention. O&K had been building construction machinery since 1876 and had a formidable reputation. The G350 weighed over 90,000 pounds and was the largest grader in production at the time it was built. It was specifically designed to maintain haul roads for the largest dump trucks of the era, trucks like the 170-ton WABCO haulers operating in British open-cast coal mines. The G350 found work at operations like Northern Strip Mining's Godkin open-cast coal site in Derbyshire, UK, maintaining roads for these enormous vehicles. But O&K's G350 faced the same fundamental commercial challenge that had killed every other supergrader before it. The market simply wasn't large enough to sustain production. Mining operations large enough to need a G350 were rare. The machines were expensive to purchase and to maintain. When global commodity prices dropped in the mid-1980s, mining companies stopped expanding their fleets and started cutting costs. O&K discontinued the G350 in 1986 after selling only 34 units across multiple countries. 34 machines. For a product that O&K had invested heavily in engineering and marketing, that number represents a commercial failure that contributed to a larger pattern of challenges that would eventually see O&K absorbed by Terex in 19. The G350 is remembered with a mixture of admiration for its engineering ambition and frustration at its commercial reality, a machine that deserved a better market than the one it was born into. Number 3. The Champion 100T. The Champion 100T has a legitimate claim to one of the most impressive specifications in motor grader history. When Dominion Road Machinery Company introduced it in 1975, the year it also achieved the world-size record, it was a machine of staggering scale, operating weight of 202,000 pounds, a 700-horsepower Cummins VT1710C engine, a 24-foot blade. It was the largest production motor grader ever built, a title it still technically holds today since the only machine that surpassed it, the ACCO Grader, never actually did any productive work. So why is the 100T on this list? Because owning one was, for many contractors, an exercise in financial misery. The machine was designed for the largest mining haul roads, the ones servicing 100-ton-plus dump trucks that were becoming more common in the late 1970s. The theory was sound. The economic reality was brutal. First, transporting the 100T between job sites was a major logistical undertaking requiring specialized heavy haulage equipment. Second, the fuel consumption of a 700-horsepower engine running all day was enormous, and the 1970s oil shocks made fuel a very serious cost consideration. Third, the pool of operators skilled enough to run the machine effectively was tiny. A 100-ton grader behaves nothing like a standard machine, and the learning curve was steep. Fourth, when something broke on a 100T, parts were expensive, lead times were long, and there were very few mechanics experienced enough to work on the drivetrain and hydraulics. Mining contractors who purchased 100Ts often found themselves with a machine sitting idle for weeks awaiting parts, while the haul roads deteriorated. The machines that were actually kept running earned a grudging respect, but the overall ownership experience left many operators deeply frustrated. Champion's reputation survived because of its more practical mid-range models. The Champion's reputation survived because of its more practical mid-range models. Number 2. The CMI Raygo Giant's descendant. When Caterpillar absorbed the rights to various supergrader technologies from CMI in 1987, they sat on those rights and did something smart. They started from scratch. In 1996, they announced the 24H 500 horsepower, 131,000 pounds, and a 24-foot moldboard. But the path to the 24H was littered with the wreckage of machines that operators had been forced to use in the interim. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, mining operations that needed large graders were essentially left with no good options. Every manufacturer that had built a serious supergrader had either discontinued it or gone out of business. The market vacuum meant that contractors were stuck trying to make do with machines that were clearly inadequate for the job. Caterpillar's own 16G, the largest grader they offered during this period, was stretched far beyond its design intent on major mining haul roads. Operators running 16Gs on roads built for 150-ton trucks knew they were fighting a losing battle. The machine would complete a pass, and the trucks would destroy the surface before the grader could make another circuit. Maintenance schedules slipped, road surfaces deteriorated, haul truck tire wear accelerated dramatically, costing mining operations millions of dollars. The period between the death of the first generation of supergraders in the mid-1980s and the arrival of the Caterpillar 24H in 1996 represents a lost decade for large-scale road maintenance, a decade during which operators were forced to use tools that simply weren't up to the task. The hatred wasn't for one specific machine, but for an entire era of inadequacy that the industry had stumbled into by letting the supergrader market collapse. Number 1. The ACCO Grader. This is the one. The ultimate story of a road grader built for greatness, cursed by history and destroyed by time. In the early 1980s, Umberto ACCO, an Italian civil construction contractor based in Portogruaro in northern Italy, received an extraordinary commission. A major project in Libya required moving truly staggering amounts of earth across wide desert areas. To do it, ACCO's company would need to build custom machines of a scale that had never existed before. They built two: the ACCO Super Bulldozer, which became the largest track dozer ever constructed, and the ACCO Motor Grader, the largest grader ever built in the history of human civilization. The specifications of the ACCO Grader are almost impossible to process. It weighed approximately 200 tons, 400,000 pounds. It had 12 tires, 2 per hub on each wheel station because no single tire could support the load. It was powered by two engines, a 1,000 horsepower unit in the rear and a 700 horsepower unit in the front, for a combined output of 1,700 horsepower. The blade measured 33 feet wide, nearly 3 feet wider than the Champion 100T's blade, which was itself the largest production grader blade ever built. The machine measured over 24 feet from side to side. It was, without question, the most powerful and the most massive road grader that any human being had ever designed and assembled. It was completed. It was tested. It was ready. And it never worked a single day in its life. The reason? Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. The Libyan leader's involvement in international terrorism during the early to mid-1980s led to severe international sanctions. The United Nations imposed trade embargoes that made it impossible to ship the ACCO Grader or its bulldozer sibling to Libya. The machines sat in the factory where they had been built, gathering dust. For years, the ACCO Grader became a bizarre tourist attraction. People who knew its location would travel to Portogruaro just to see the world's biggest grader sitting completely idle in a storage facility. Industry publications wrote about it with a mixture of awe and sadness. Here was a machine that could have reshaped how the world thought about large-scale earth moving, and it was just sitting there, slowly deteriorating. The situation grew even more tragic when Umberto Eco died, followed by his son. Without family leadership, the company began to collapse. By 2008, the ACCO facility had essentially become an abandoned dump yard, with a massive grader and bulldozer sitting amid a growing collection of derelict earth-moving machinery. What had once been the most impressive facility in Italian heavy construction was now a ruin. The bulldozer was eventually saved. In May 2012, it was moved to a local gardening company in Portogruaro for preservation. And on October 13, 2024, the superdozer actually roared back to life again. After years of inactivity, a remarkable moment for heavy equipment enthusiasts worldwide. But the grader was not so lucky. The chassis was cut apart and scrapped in September and October of 2012. The blade, the cab, and the rear twin tires were sold off separately, reportedly to a buyer in France. The greatest road grader ever built was reduced to scrap metal without ever having touched a road. The ACCO Grader is hated not because it failed as a machine. It never got the chance to fail or succeed. It is hated because of everything it represents: the intersection of political catastrophe, corporate tragedy, and engineering ambition that was simply born in the wrong time and the wrong place. It is a machine that the construction world deserved to see work and never did. That is a kind of hatred born from grief, from the mourning of something that could have been extraordinary. So that's it for today. If you like this video, then please hit the like and subscribe button for more videos. Thanks for watching.